Hi all, this is a new venture for me, so it's going to be a little bit different to what I'm actually used to and out of my comfort zone. But I thought I'd decide to do a YouTube channel based on my vintage looks, how I got into vintage and everything in between. It's only going to be about 10-15 minutes long, so it's not going to be too long, you won't get too bored. So the first one is an introduction to myself. My name's Jack, I'm 26, I live in Crewe at the moment. I spent most of my life growing up in Kidderminster. And when I was at school I suffered a lot of bullying because of my weight, and it really got me down, and I went through high school not really knowing who I was, what I was doing in life, didn't know who I was as a person, and kind of like saw my life getting worse and worse. My nan died in 2015, and from there I kind of went into a spiral of depression, and I was like, oh, I need to do something. I need to find out exactly who I am and find out who I am. I'd had enough of bullying. My family weren't exactly the greatest people to be around. I spent a lot of my life being lambasted or picked on for being a fussy eater, or because of my weight, or for my hobbies and interests, mainly due to the fact that I am a train enthusiast. So I was like, I need something that's going to make me feel, unstoppable. And so, in honour of my nan, she used to watch CSI Miami, and the CSI programmes quite a lot, and it was, I never used to watch it because it weren't my sort of stuff. I wanted to watch comedies, I wanted to watch my sort of stuff, but I never could because she had the remote. She was disabled, so she sat in her chair and she had the control of the remote, so we had to watch what she watched. And when she passed away, I can remember listening to obviously, or hearing the CSI theme tune, and I was like, I want to know who this band is. It's a great tune. I don't know who made it, who sung it, and after a bit of a bit of watching, I knew it was The Who. So my love of the 60s really got into there. I mean, I grew up with a family that was mainly 60s babies that kind of listened to Motown, bit of soul, bit of country and western on the odd occasion. So I kind of grew up with a vintage music choice in my life, and it was one of those. So after discovering The Who, I kind of started listening to like the Rolling Stones and a few things like that, and I started getting into the 60s, but I didn't really know what I was doing. Didn't know how to dress properly. I went from wearing jogging bottoms and trainers to starting to wear Ben Shermans and jeans, or something that made me feel mod, made me feel vintage at that point. Wouldn't necessarily call it the style I've got today, or the style that most of you would have seen on my Instagram or Facebook if you're on my Facebook. And I was getting there, I went to the Cavern Club a couple of times, and a love for a Beatles started to form. And then one day my dad come back from someone's house, and he had loads of DVDs, and one of them was a film called Quadrophenia. Now, a lot of people may be familiar with Quadrophenia, a lot of people may not. So for those who don't, Quadrophenia was a film in the late 70s, which was named after and included music of The Who. So for me, it was kind of like, oh yeah, I'll give this a chance and see what this is like, and kind of, listen to The Who's music on film. And so I watched it, and it was about a story of about a young mod who didn't quite know where he fitted in. He had 4 different personalities, and he didn't know where he fitted in, and dressed up smartly, and he felt an outcast from society. And I related to that on a personal level. As I said, when I was at school, I never really knew where I fitted in with people. I always tried to get on with every single person I could, but sometimes it just got a little bit too much, and a lot of people just took advantage of my good nature. But anyway, getting back to Quadrophenia, after the film had finished, a light switch went off in my head, sort of thing. I was like, I want to be like the guys in this film. I want to be smartly dressed. I want to parade around on a scooter. I want everything that I can see from this film that was, you know, set roughly around the early mods in the 60s. And I changed. I kind of went, do you know what? Let's do something about it. And I started off, I was like, oh yeah, get myself a suit, make myself a lot of mod. So the first suit I really brought was like a silver, shiny silver. It made me look like an idiot. It looked like I was wearing tinfoil. I don't know what the hell I was doing, but at the same time, I was a lot skinnier back then, and you know, after years of bullying, and I suffered sort of an eating disorder where I just did not eat whatsoever, and I lost a lot of weight, and at that stage I was 11 stone. I'm now 16 stone, so it's not too bad. It's only a 5 stone gain, but it's still substantial enough. But back then I kind of like started listening to The Who, The Kinks, and kind of delving into this world and realms of possibilities from the 60s, watching countless and countless videos of other bands, the Beatles, Otis Redding, Small Faces, and people like that kind of influenced not only who I am as a person today, but also my style. And I know for a fact, if it weren't for finding that, or the 60s scene, the mod scene, or the vintage scene just in general, because I do 50s, 40s, and also the Peaky Blinders era, I know for a fact if it weren't for the love of vintage, or finding the love of vintage and the music of people like The Who, I don't think I'd be talking to you right now to this camera in my living room in Crewe. I think I would be long gone by now. As harsh as that sounds, and it's a bit of a trigger warning, I don't think I would have been around. So it's credit to myself, and also the music of these great bands and artists from the 60s and 70s and even 50s, with some of the lyrics that kind of changed my mind. So without further ado, we'll go a little bit further into the music side of things. You've got to know who I am, you've got to know why I went into the vintage. So now let's go into the music side of things. So I've mentioned quite a few artists already: Otis Redding, the Beatles, The Who, the Kinks, the Small Faces, amongst others. So The Who was the main band I really got into, and I kind of fell in love with The Who as a band. And after Quadrophenia, I was so hyped up on watching or listening to their music that I went out and brought a few of their videos, CDs and vinyls. My first vinyl I ever brought was My Generation by The Who, and it opened up other possibilities, because after listening to The Who, I went to the Kinks. It was the Small Faces. I'd already been kind of brought up with the Stones and the Beatles, but never really the Kinks and the Small Faces, so to discover them was something different. But then after a while you start to discover who actually inspired those bands, so you dive a little bit deeper into the roots of rock and roll music and rock music as we know it today. Even bands like Metallica nowadays with James Hetfield, even he was inspired by the Kinks, who in turn were inspired by people like Tommy Tucker of the blues fame, or Little Richard of rock and roll. And it's the same with The Who. The Who covered Mose Allison, who was a jazz musician, or they covered Eddie Cochran, who was a rock and roll musician. Even people like the Isley Brothers, Derek Martin, and people like that who kind of like inspired like the next generation. So my music taste really does vary. I primarily listen to 50s and 60s, you know. I'm a big fan of Buddy Holly. I feel that Buddy Holly changed the course of history with his rock and roll music. Elvis gets quite rightly the plaudits because of his image, because of how charming, charismatic, good looking he was. But Buddy Holly for me stood out a lot more. Buddy Holly wrote his own tunes, and his tunes were so, how to put this, was so unique. So you had stuff like That'll Be the Day, Rave On, Peggy Sue, which was actually about Jerry Allison, who was his drummer at the time's girlfriend. He'd split up and wanted her back, so they changed the lyrics around from Mary Lou to Peggy Sue, and I say Peggy Sue come about. Little Richard as well influenced me quite a lot with his high rocking, high tempo music. Chuck Berry was another one, listening to people like Johnny B. Good. Songs not people. Songs like Johnny B. Good, Maybelline, and stuff like that, and it really inspired me. And the one that inspired me the most in the 50s, and well, actually, and even in the 60s, the one that really inspired me to actually listen to music was Buddy Holly. So going back to the what I said about Buddy Holly being better than Elvis, Buddy Holly actually inspired me a lot because his music, the way he sung, he had some sort of like a hiccup in his voice. So when he was singing Peggy Sue, you could hear every time he finished a sentence, it was like a almost like a squeak come out of his voice. And for me, that was different. Every Day, one of his songs, instead of Jerry Allison playing the drums, he actually played the legs. He kind of pittered and pattered around on his legs to make a drumming sound, and it worked really well. Just as Buddy Holly's genius on the guitar was, he also knew what to do with the rest of his musicians. But anyway, I won't bore you any further with Buddy Holly, but we'll go on to the 60s. The 60s is a vast range of music. There are films out there that have songs. Even Spotify and YouTube nowadays are becoming more and more of a forefront for me to explore these different bands, different musicians that I've never really heard of, or takes on songs that I didn't know existed. And one of the main inspirations for me in the 60s is Otis Redding. Otis Redding released such a great catalogue of songs with the help of Steve Cropper and the resident Stax band of Bucatini MGs and the Marquis and the Barkeys, actually. They've released so many great songs. Otis Redding was just unreal, from Shake, which was a cover of Sam Cooke, all the way through to his last song, which was Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, which is probably one of the most classic and most chilled out songs you could think of. A lot of these songs that Otis produced, and even artists in the 50s and 60s, hit me more in my soul than anything that was produced from the period I'm actually born in. I was born in 95, so anything from 95 or the 90s to nowadays doesn't sit right with me as much as it should. There are a few artists out there that go back to the old roots. George Ezra, Miles Kane and Nathaniel Rateliff all kind of hit the spot for me because they have that sort of old-fashioned feel to them. George Ezra being inspired by Bob Dylan and Lead Belly. Miles Kane having more of a Paul McCartney-esque outlook on life and on his music as well, and Nathaniel Rateliff giving sort of like a Johnny Cash meets Otis Redding vibe. So if you ever need to check out new bands, then I will always suggest new bands. I will drop a Spotify link down below in the description section, just so you can get to know some of the music that I listen to, some of the songs that make me tick. These videos will go on for roughly 10-15 minutes every week, or when I have time, and I'm a very busy boy at the moment, carrying 2 jobs and trying to do 50s and 60s reenactments. So I'll try and upload as much as possible. But yeah, so this is my first video. I hope I haven't really lost interest of a lot of people. on this, and I hope to see you again next week, where we'll be talking more about the fashion. I mean, at the moment I'm dressed up. This is quite late. I'm recording at about 11:30 at night, so I'm ready for bed. But I thought, I know if I don't get it done now, I'd never get it done. So I'll look a bit of a mess tonight. But next week I will show you some of the clothes, some of the styles that I actually wear, or who actually inspired me with some of my choices in clothes. So thank you for joining in. I'm not expecting loads and loads of views, loads and loads of likes, whatever. I'm just doing this for me. It's nice that if people are watching, that they do get a look at my life and explain who I actually am as a person. So next week, join me for, as I said, about the clothing and a few more bits and bobs. If you've got any more suggestions for videos in the near future, what you'd like to hear from me, please let me know in the comment section, or on my social medias on Facebook or Instagram, JackTheAnimal_95, and I will respond to pretty much everything. So thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary, can't forget non-binary, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.